We're holding on 26b2. Okay, we're holding by the words lo yasik. So just to remind everybody, back in the first Mishnah in the second parak, Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Aleph is 21a. The Mishnah over there said regarding chametz, that says over zamanoi, if it's time past, asabah nase, it was asab from any kind of benefit, and then it said that includes v'lo yasik boy tano v'kirayim. You shall not fire up fuel. You shall not fuel using this chametz and stovetop ranges. The idea being, since I'm allowed to burn the chametz, why can't I simply burn the chametz by sticking them under the oven or under the stovetop and burn it that way? And I can go ahead and cook with it. Said, no, that's not allowed. You have to burn it. You have to burn it by itself. And in burning it by itself, you're not allowed to have any benefit.
Somebody has to
at the time that you having
mute them.
So that's what the mission. Yeah, Jerry. Okay.
Everybody's
okay.
muted.
So here we go. Says the Gemara. Well, we're okay. Here we go. Says the Gemara. So now I'm going to warn everybody at the beginning of the Gemara today. The beginning of the Gemara today is a little difficult. Okay, I just want to make sure. Can everybody hear me? Is that working okay? Let's somebody give me a fingers up. Jeffrey, can you hear me? Charlie, can you hear me? Jerry,
yes.
Can you hear me?
I'm the only one that's not muted.
Can you hear me?
Everybody can hear you.
I don't think can you guys hear or not?
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody can hear me. Great. So here we go.
Everyone's good. Everyone's good.
Good. Everybody's good. Good. If one fired up the oven, one started an oven with the peels or the bark of arla fruits or an arla tree. Once again, arla is a new tree that you planted, which is perfectly fine, but the first 3 years you're not allowed to use it. In the fourth year, it has to go up, the fruits have to go up to Yerushalayim, and only in year 5 can you use it regularly. So the first 3 years, you're not allowed to use it, and you're not allowed to have any benefit from it. But this guy went ahead and had his oven or his range, but let's go to the oven, and he fired up the oven with the peels of arla fruits, which are no good, or the bark, or the wood of an arla fruit, or with straw of the client of the vineyard. If you remember again, we said that a vineyard, you're not allowed to plant within a vineyard grains. There has to be a separation. They can't be growing both in the same land. And he went ahead and did so. And then he took those crops, those grains, those straw that grew within the vineyard, and he used it to fire up this oven. Okay, so that's not allowed. Chadash, if it's a brand new oven, utates, it needs to be shattered. Yashan, if it's old, it's already used. Yutzan, it needs to cool down before you're allowed to use it again. What's the reasoning here? Because we all know an earthenware oven, even a metal oven, but let's talk earthenware. The first time you use it, when you fire it up, it hardens up the walls. It completes the oven. Like anything else, it needs to get into a fire to go ahead and complete it, and to complete it. So the first time you're using an oven, by firing it up, the fire itself benefits the oven tremendously by hardening it up, by putting into it isbalea into it flavor that allows it to seep in the flavor, as it were, of the fuel that goes into it and hardens it up. So we're saying like this, therefore the oven, by dint of being fired up by this illegal fuel, by definition became an oven that no longer can be used at this point in the game. So A new oven, which the first time it's being used, the fire, tremendously benefits the oven by hardening it up and strengthening the earth and the material. That can't be done. A yashin, an old one already, an oven that's already been used, by definition, it's already been hardened and all that. So this time around, you use no good fuel, illegal fuel, as it were. We wait until you cool down. The benefit of the fuel, therefore, dissipates. And then you can use the oven again. Says the Gemara Vaita, Ofa boyas apas, if one then baked bread in it while it's still being fired up with this illegal fuel, whether in a old oven or whether in a new oven, if at the same time you were baking bread and the fire was going, so now the bread is benefiting as well from the illegal fuel. Rebbe Yomi Hapasi Surah, the Rebbe says the bread is forbidden, you have to throw away the bread. The Chachamim and the Chachamim say, Hapas Muteres, no, the bread is still good. We are now on 26b3 because Rebbe says the fuel does go ahead and influence and benefit the thing that's being cooked or being baked. The Chachamim simply say, no, it doesn't. It's not so bad. It only benefited the oven. Afterwards, it doesn't really benefit so much the actual bread that's being cooked. Bishla al gabe gecholim, but everybody says if you cook the bread on top of coals from a forbidden substance. So, for example, if you use the bark of the tree of an orla, and now that bark became coal. So now, and as we're going to see, it means coal. That means it's completely grayed. There's no more fire, essentially. Divrei hakol, it's mutter. Now it's mutter because by the time it became coal, the illegal substance no longer is be'en, is no longer tangible. It's no longer tangible. Therefore, the problem no longer exists. So, Frank the Gemara, but Tanya, we learned in another brayso, ben chadash, whether a new oven, ben yashan, whether an old oven, yutzan. You have to allow it to cool if I use illegal fuel substance. The brayso we just learned, according to Rebbe, at the very least, said if I do that, chadash yutates, chadash, the new oven, the first time oven, I have to destroy because the oven in essence has become hardened and strengthened because of this illegal fuel. So it's embedded into the walls of the oven. So the whole oven can no longer be used. Sip b'pashtus, says the Gemara loy kasha. It's not a kasha. Rebbe, the first brayso that says that the new oven has to be destroyed, that's Rebbe. The second brayso that says it just needs to be cooled down is Rebbe, is the Chachamim who say it doesn't go in so much. And now we just get to a little difficult Gemara. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Rebbe. What did you learn from Rebbe in that first brayso? You learned from Rebbe clearly these words. Ofa boyas apas. If one baked bread in it while it's fired up with these things, the Rebbe said, hapas asura. The bread is asur. The bread is prohibited. Because he was saying like this, says the Gemara. Mishum, because the yesh shevach eitzim b'pas. Because there is improvement by the illegal wood that was being used that is now contained in the bread. In other words, everybody, an oven by itself has no meaning. An oven by itself only exists so that there are things that could be baked in it. So if there are things that can be baked in it, if the bread that's baked in it becomes usher by dint of the oven, that means you can never cook bread in it because the bread always will have within it the illegal substance that's coming from the oven, then you no longer can eat the bread, and therefore the oven becomes completely useless. Because every time you use this oven, the bread that you're baking in the oven has to be thrown away. So by definition, you now have to get rid of this oven. So you shouldn't come to bake bread. You shouldn't come to bake bread that you're then going to have to throw away. So you have to destroy the oven. So the oven by itself is not the issue. The issue is regarding the food that goes into it. So in this case, we're saying it's because the bread that was cooked up while this oven was being fired up with this illegal fuel, the bread itself became no good by the illegal fuel that it was being fired up with. The shum, the yesh, shevach, eitzim, v'pas. There is the benefit of the illegal wood of the olive tree that is now in the pas. However, everybody, let me ask you this. So the first time you heated up the oven with the illegal fuel, the illegal fuels went into the oven, into the walls of the oven. I agree. But now the second, let's say you bake no bread in it. That's all you did was fire it up. The second time you use the oven, the fuel source the second time is not illegal. The fuel source the second time is perfectly kosher fuel. You're using regular wood. You went to Jeffrey Cobb's backyard and you took his new tree with his permission and you chopped it down and you went ahead and used its wood. Okay? You used its wood. That means the second time you used it, it's perfectly good wood. And now you put the bread in. So now the bread is being benefited by the new fuel, which is perfectly kosher. It's also being benefited by the oven that it's in, which was fired up originally with no good fuel. So it's also benefiting from the walls of the oven, which have within it no good fuels. That means the bread is now going on into the future, benefiting from no good fuel, the original no good fuel that's embedded in the walls of the oven, but it's also benefiting from the brand new fuel source, which is perfectly good. Right now, it's a perfectly good wood. It's a kosher wood. In fact, it's probably benefiting more from the new wood because that's the actual fuel source that's being done now. Says the Gemara. When I have a case when this and this are being goyim, are causing benefit, is causing this bread that's now in the oven to benefit, and the walls of the oven, which is from is also causing it to benefit source, and certainly from a legal source. Says the Gemara, did we ever food both
Yitzchak. Yes. Yitzchak. Yitzchak. I don't hear him.
You guys
There he is. He's
see me?
back.
Charlie, can you see me? Charlie,
No.
Jeffrey, can you guys hear me? Yeah?
No.
Okay,
No.
so here we go. So, yeah, Jeffrey, no good?
I can hear you, but I don't
Can you
see. I can
me?
hear but not see.
Also, we
That's
we
very
probably
weird.
missed the
Let's
last
see.
5 minutes.
The last 5 minutes have been no good. Okay. Can you guys hear me? Let's see if I can move. This is a problem. I was afraid of this because of the weather. Is this?
Jeffrey, you have to mute yourself.
Okay, I'll do it right now.
All right. Is this better? Just let me know if this is better.
I can hear you.
Is this better or no good?
This
You
is
can hear
good.
me. Now you can hear me.
I
This
can
is
hear
good.
you.
You
I
can
can't
actually
see
see
you,
me.
but I can hear you.
All right. So I don't know why you guys can't see me because I'm in, what do you call it? It's there. But if you can hear me, just if you can't hear me, put up your hands or something so I know. So where did you guys lose me? Charlie, do you know where you lost me?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the fact that we're not, that if Rebbe holds, Zev is Gorei Masur, then we could attribute it to him, but we're not sure he holds that way.
Correct. So that's where we're up to. Perfect.
Yes.
So we
okay.
got the idea. Excuse me. There are things all over my chair. Hold on. All right, here we go. All right, so let me just turn on the lights here and we're good to go. Hold on. There we go. Okay, so it goes like this. So now that we said that the bread is being approved by this person and that person, this person and this fuel source, which is good, and that fuel source that's no good, that means at that moment in time, I don't know that the bread is not good. The bread should be good because it started off light as good dough, and it's at the very least being benefited from good fuel. It also has some benefit from no good fuel, but zev is garim mishametlei. Whoever heard that anybody said that zev is garim is no good. So we're on 26b4, okay? And again, if you guys can't hear me, let me know. Wave or something. Elo loy kasha, says the Gemara. Ha Rabbi Eliezer, the first brisa that says the new oven has to be shattered is the view, the shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Ha Rabbanon, the second brisa that says no, the new oven and old oven, all they need to do is be cooled off, is the Rabbi. Hi Rabbi Eliezer. Who is Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer disa'ar. Maybe it's Rabbi Eliezer who discusses something regarding yeast, the leavening agent, the Tanya, because we learned like this. You have the situation like this. Sa'ar shel chulin. You have yeast of chulin. And v'shel truma. And you have yeast of truma. So you have two different pieces of yeast. You have two different pieces of yeast. Neither piece is strong enough in any which way to affect something else, to make something else rise, to make something else mechametz, to leaven something else. Together, they have the power, they're strong enough to make something else rise to the leaven. So the case is like this. Sa'ar shechulin, a small piece of yeast of good old non-sacred chulin. V'shel teruma, and a small piece of yeast of teruma. Shenapul l'toich isa, that falls into dough of chulin. So now the question is, this dough, did it just become teruma that only a kohen can eat? Or no, it still remains chulin, non-sacred, and everybody can eat it. Says the Gemara, ve'ein b'zeh kedei lahachmitz, ve'ein b'zeh kedei lahachmitz. In neither piece of yeast, neither the chulin yeast nor the truma yeast, neither one of them have the power by themselves to make something rise, to leaven bread dough. V'nistarpru v'chimtzu, and they combine together. The two of them together have the power to leaven the dough. Rabbi Eliezer oima acher achran aniba. I go after last. The last piece of yeast. Whichever one fell in, that determines what this dough is now. If the last piece that fell in was the yeast of chulin, then the dough is good old chulin, non-sacred, and everybody can eat it. If the last piece that fell in was truma, now only the kohen can eat it as truma. Whether the truma one fell in first, or or the truma one fell in last, it's never, the dough is never forbidden. The dough is never forbidden. We are now on the top of Chav Zayin Amid Aleph. We're on today's daf. Unless there's enough within each piece to leaven the bread. But in this sense, the truma one, in this case, did not have enough power in itself, and the truma yeast did not have enough power within itself to leaven, to affect change in what it fell into, to make it rise. Zok Rabbanan, it's not a problem. It remains as chulin, non-sacred dough. Va'amar Abaye, and comes Abaye and says, let me explain to you Rabbi Eliezel's position, this strange position of Acher, Akron, and Iba, that I go after the last thing that falls in. He says, that doesn't really mean simply last in, first out. What does that really mean? So he says like this, Rabbi Eliezer didn't say that if the chulin piece is the last yeast to fall into the dough, that the dough remains chulin. That's only if you anticipated and you saw that first the truma yeast fell in, and then you realized that the chulin yeast was going to fall in, so you ran and you grabbed out, you pulled out the truma yeast. But if you didn't run and anticipate and remove the truma iser from the dough, so that when the chulin fell in, the chulin yeast fell in, and the truma yeast was still in there, so for a few minutes it had the chance together to combine and begin the yeast process, the leaven process. In that case, usher, it becomes usher. Alma, you see, that Rabbi Eliezer must hold, Zev Zeh Goyrim is usher. If this and that cause, it becomes usher. Because if they combine to get separately, neither one has the power to affect any kind of change, because the yeasts by themselves are not strong enough. It's only when the two of them, the yeast of the chulin and the yeast of the truma, combine, that it could go ahead and rise. So you see that you have over here the chulin, which is the good one, can help it rise, and the truma, which is no good because it only limits it to the kohen, combined together to rise. We say, guess what? It creates that it is now completely truma and also. So Rabbi Eliezer is the one that says Zev Zeh Garim is also. So Zakti Gemara, the Tami Rabbi Eliezer Abaye. Who said that? Just because Abaye said it, that's Pshat in Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe it's exactly what Rabbi Eliezer said. I go after the last. Whatever's the last one that falls in, that's the one I go with. And if the last one to fall in happens to be the chulin, that's the one that determines what it is. And if the last one that falls in is truma, that's the one that determines. It doesn't matter whether he anticipated and removed the truma one before the chulin yeast fell in, or he didn't. It doesn't matter. If the permitted leaven, if the chulin one fell in last, it's good, the dough is permitted, and if the forbidden one fell in last, the dough is forbidden except for the kohen. Avol, this is the chiddush of Rabbi Eliezer, when the two fell in at the same time, when the chulin yeast and the truma yeast fell in at the same time. So we're dealing with, there is no last, there is no first and last. They fell in at exactly the same time. Hochanami deshari. I would say they are good, because in truth I hold Zev Zeh Garim is mutter. When you have both things that together affect change, and one of them is good and one of them is no good, we go with the good. It's mutter. So this can't be the place where we prove that Rabbi Eliezer is the one that holds Zev Zeh Goyim is Aser. This thing and this thing that cause creates a forbidden situation. So maybe because it's not clear, you can learn it one of two ways. So Ella Rabbi Eliezer da'atzei Ashera. We're talking about the Rabbi Eliezer that who said something regarding the wood of an ashram. Once again, we're dealing with a tree that was bowed down as avodah zarah for idolatry. Everything about that tree is aser. The wood is not allowed to be used. Nothing is allowed to be used. It's not, because we learned regarding the Asherah tree. If one took branches from an Asherah tree, okay, they are forbidden from Ano. Also by Ano, it's forbidden for benefit. But what happens if a guy took it and he said, sorry, Hisik behemoth satana, he fired up the oven with this Asherah wood, this illegal wood. So similar to previous, Chodosh Yutatz, a new oven has to be shattered because it benefits directly from this illegal fuel. It hardens and strengthens its walls. Yoshan Yoitzen, an old one has to be cool. Ofa Boyes Apas, Isurim Ba'ano. If you bake bread in it, whether with in the new one or the old one, what he called the bread is no good. Okay, is no good. And everybody seems to say this right now. Nisarva ba'achrayas. Now, this piece of bread that we just said is also, it goes ahead and it falls into another basket of permitted breads. And then, and then from this new basket of which the bread that was no good fell into, one bread from this new basket now fell into a second basket of bread. Kulan is surin bahano. All the breads are forbidden for benefit. We are now on 27A, number 2. Okay, they are all now forbidden for benefit. Okay, because number 1, avodah zarah, idolatry, is also b'mashu, is also even by a drop. It's so stringent that you can't have anything, even if it's not a normal size, it's just a crumb, it's also. That's number 1. And also that when you bake bread, every bread that's baked, especially homemade bread, each one is a dover chashuv. Each one has value within itself so that it's not nullified within other food. We all know that food is nullified 1 to 60, 60 to 1. Regular chulin food is nullified 61, but not when it's a dover chashuv. And when it has within itself, has tremendous bread when it's baked by itself, each bread has value within itself, cannot be nullified. And this iser that we say that it's also bano, certainty of an uncertainty. Number 1, we said the illegal bread fell into the first basket. Who said that the bread from the first basket that fell into the second basket was the illegal bread? It might have been the good bread. So that's first uncertainty. And then, imtim tsuloimi, you want to say, okay, the bread that fell out of the first basket was from that original illegal bread. Who said the bread that you're now picking up out of the second basket is the illegal one that fell into it? So the truth of the matter is it's an uncertainty with uncertainty where usually we go lekula. Here we say, no, it's also bahano, it's completely also for benefit because it's avodah zarah. Comes Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, back to the Gemara. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, Rabbi Eliezer says, Yoilich hano liyam hamelech. You're allowed to take the monetary value of the forbidden benefit and throw it into the Yam HaMelech, into the Dead Sea, and cast it in. In other words, he says you can redeem. Let's say you have this piece of bread over here. So you can say it's worth $5. You can say this $5 that I now have in my hand, I'm redeeming that bread onto this $5. So the $5 becomes asur, forbidden, and now the bread, according to Rabbi Eliezer, could be used. And then you have to take this $5 and you got to go to the Dead Sea and throw the $5 into the Dead Sea. On this, Amru Loi, so the Chachamim say to him, the Rabbanan say, Ein pidyon l'avodah zarah. There is no such thing as redemption for idolatry, for avodah zarah. Avodah zarah is one of those things, it's also period, that's it, no, full stop. But what do you see? That according to Rabbi Eliezer, if you don't redeem, and you don't put it onto money, and you don't throw it into the Dead Sea, Rabbi Eliezer agrees with the Tanakama that the new oven needs to be shattered. The only reason why it doesn't need to be shattered is only if you redeem it, and then you have to destroy whatever you put it on in the Dead Sea. But if you don't do that, it needs to be shattered. You see that Rabbi Eliezer clearly holds Zev and Zeg Goyrim is also what it calls forbidden. Says the Gemara, no proof. When did you learn this? That Zev and Zeg Goyrim, this and that cause a legal and illegal cause is ba'avodah zarah, only by the laws of avodah zarah. The chamir isra, whose isra, whose forbidden status is extremely stringent. We don't bend. The entire purpose of the Torah on some level is to eradicate idolatry. Bishari sun sheb'Torah, but all of the prohibitions of the Torah. For example, the previous case of Arla and Kalayim, the case of the Arla tree that the first 3 years, or Kalayim, or grains that were cooked in it, that were grown together in the vineyard, which except Mishamet Lay. Where do you see that over there? Rabbi Eliezer would agree that Zev and Zeg Goyim is Aser. Maybe over there he says Zev and Zeg Goyim is mutter. This and that is mutter. Because the reality is, there's no reason not to say that. Avodah zarah, adultery is an outlier. You can't learn from idolatry to everything else. So Zakti Gemara, Eliam Cain, Aman Tarame. But if that's what you're saying, that you can't learn out just because by avodah zarah he says Zev and Zeg Goyim is Aser, you can't learn it out to anywhere else, then who's the Tana of that Baraisa that says that with Arla and Kalayim you have to destroy, you have to shatter the new oven? It has to be somebody who's the Tana. The closest one that we have is Rabbi Eliezer, because at the very least he's the one person that says in at least one case, Va'oid Hatanya Bahade, it's actually taught directly in the Brisa. V'chein hay Rabbi Eliezer oisa b'chol isurim sheb'Torah. That in fact Rabbi Eliezer asked all joint product and all zev v'zeh, all cases of where you have what he called prohibited with permitted. Whatever comes out of that, he says, b'chol isurim sheb'Torah becomes aser. So now we know that it's Rabbi Eliezer. That's the one that says zev v'zeh goyim is aser, and a new oven, therefore, which benefited directly from the fire, is aser, and therefore any bread that's cooked in it going forward is going to benefit directly from the illegal fuel that it was originally cooked up with. So he holds it, even if you're using good fuel now, he says it doesn't matter because it's benefiting zev v'zeh goyim is aser. So now Abai is going to make some observations. Amar Abai, Imtim Suleiman. Now he's going to go back to Rebbe. Rebbe who said the bread that was baked in such an oven needs to be thrown away, is aser. So Imtim Suleiman, if you want to say the reason why he said that the bread is aser, is because Rebbe agrees with Rabbi Eliezer that zev v'zeh goyim is aser. Rebbe Hainu, Rabbi Eliezer, then Rebbe and Rabbi Eliezer are the same opinion that zev v'zeh goyim is also, the bread has got to go. And Rebbe, by definition, by saying that the bread has got to go, he really meant that the new oven has got to go, because zev v'zeh goyim. That no, Rebbe really holds zev v'zeh goyim is mutter. He says no, really, this and that prohibited with permitted. The stuff that is baked like that is mutter. What about the bread? Why does the bread have to be thrown out in that case? You're right, it's benefiting from the walls of the oven, from the illegal fuels, but it's also benefiting from the kosher fuel source that you're now using the second and third time. here is clearly benefiting as well from the walls of the oven, clearly benefiting as well from the original illegal fuel source. So if that's the case, so he says like this, where something is clearly benefiting from the illegal source, we're now on 27A3, is clearly benefiting from the source. In that case, he says, even usually that Zev and Zeh Gorim is mutter, not in such a case where the Shevach is so clear, here I can't let you off the hook. So then, Frank the Gemara, what about this case then? Hani ke'ores v'koises v'tziloichios isurei, bowls, cups, or flasks. So cups, let's just call it cups and bowls, which have to be heated up. They're earthenware. They're made out of clay. So obviously they need to be heated up. And you put them in and you heat them up with this illegal fuel source. And now you created them. Are they like bread? They seem to be like bread. They're benefiting directly from the illegal source. Do we say, they should be usher? So keep pligi, and where does Rebbe and Rabbi Eliezer disagree? The only bitano ukeredo ukedero, only by an earthenware oven or a pot, which was completed by this fire. So there he would say, in the case of an oven and a pot, which benefit directly because both of them are hardened up and benefited by the illegal fire, that's where Rabbi Eliezer would say, Zeh v'zeh asur, even by such a case, asur. Lamadi ama zeh v'zeh goyrim mutter, but according to the one like Rebbe, who says in reality, Zeh v'zeh goyrim is mutter, shari, the oven, it would be permitted, the oven and the pot, because their benefit does not accrue to the person. Again, what did we say before? The oven in and of itself is meaningless. It's about the bread or other stuff that are going to be cooked in it. The pot or the oven are not going to be eaten. Since they're not going to be eaten in and of themselves, they are meaningless. If after they were fired up with the illegal fuel, you then the second time cook bread in them and all that with kosher legal fuel, Rebbe says, the bread is good. You can eat the bread. Well, if I can eat the bread, I don't have to destroy the oven. Hardened up by illegal fuels, that doesn't affect me. What affects me is, can I eat the food that I cooked in there, that I baked in there? Good. The second time you use the oven, you're baking with kosher fuel. If you're baking with kosher fuel, the food is being benefited from the kosher fuel and the walls of the oven. But if I hold Zeh v'zeh goyrim is mutter, I'm allowed to eat the bread. If I'm allowed to eat the bread, I can keep the oven and the scenting with the pot. Comes the Gemara, it says ikadiyamri, not so clear. Afilu leman diyama like Rebbe that says Zeh v'zeh goyrim is mutter, and therefore kedera asur. The oven would be mutter for the reason we just said. You're right. The oven in and of itself was hardened up by illegal fuels. But the second time you use the oven, you bake stuff with kosher fuels. So the thing inside, let's call it the bread, benefited from the kosher fuels and from the walls of the oven, which is from an illegal fuel source. It doesn't matter. Zeh v'zeh goyrim is mutter. But the pot is no good. Kedera asura. The kibla bishula mikame didinitan eitzim betera. Because it contains food to be cooked before the permitted fuel source, the permitted fuel wood is used for it. What do I mean? An oven is here. You put the food into the oven that's heated up. So when you put the food into the oven, immediately it's benefiting from the good new fuel, as well as the walls of the oven, the no good fuel. By a pot, says the Gemara, first you place the food into the pot on the counter. Then you carry the pot over to the fire. So for a few minutes, the food is only sitting in the pot, which means for a few minutes it's only benefiting from the pot, which was hardened up with the illegal fuel. So that means the food that's sitting in the pot is only benefiting from the illegal fuel that's part and parcel, that's embedded in the pot. It's only 2 minutes later when I lift up the pot with the food in it and put it on the fire source that it's now also benefiting from the good fuel. Since there's a period of time before the food is cooked, there's a period of time, it might only be 1 or 2 minutes, that it's still benefiting only exclusively from the pot that's illegal, right? It's no good. No good. Charlie, you can't hear me? Charlie, you can't hear. Charlie, can you hear me? Oh, you could. Okay, good. So then in that case, the ketera is no good. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel says like this: Tan an oven that was fired up with the peels or the wood of arla fruits, or from the straw that was grown in the vineyard, the klayim chodesh utates. A new oven has to be shattered. Yoshin an old oven has to be cooled off before it can be used again. If you go ahead and bake bread in that fire, Rebbe Oima hapas muteres. Now just the opposite. Rebbe says the pas is good, the bread is good. The chachamim surah that the bread is no good. Right? The Gemara about Tanya, we just learned the opposite. That Rebbe says the bread is no good, and the rabbis say that the bread is good. Says the Gemara, Shmuel ibchatani. Shmuel's version was actually was the opposite. That it's Rebbe that says the bread is good, and the chachamim that the bread is no good. The Iba is an important lesson in life. That in reality, it was like the first brisa. Rebbe says the bread is no good. The Rabbanon said the bread is good. Who's the majority over there? The Rabbanon, who say the bread is good. Ba'alma says the Gemara, Kesova Shmuel halacha keRebbe mechaveroi. The halacha is always like Rebbe HaKadosh when he's arguing one-on-one with a different Tana. Abba v'loi mechaverov. But the halacha is not like Rebbe when he's arguing on many of his colleagues, on all the Rabbanon. Ubaha, but in this case of bread that was baked with forbidden fuel, with illegal fuel, afilu mechaverov, Shmuel says this is the one case where we hold like Rebbe, even when he's arguing with all the Rabbanon. The Savar, he thought, Asyan Ibcha, I'm going to learn it backwards, that it's the Rebbes that say it's Aser, and Rebbe that says it's Muta, ki heichi denekim Rabbanim li'isura, so that everybody will think that it's the rabbis or the Rabbanim that are the ones that take the prohibiting view. Because he said, if I teach this to the people, if I teach this to the Olam and say Rebbe says it's Aser, the Rabbanim say it's Mutter, everybody's going to say, well, okay, then it's Mutter because we go after the majority. But this is the one case that we actually paskin like Rebbe, and Lamaisa into the Shulchan Aruch, we paskin like Rebbe, that if an oven is heated up with an illegal fuel source, what you call the bread that's cooked up in it is Aser. We actually do hold like Rebbe in this case. He said, how am I going to get people to hold the law? By flipping it out and letting them think it's all the Rabbanim that hold like this, and that's going to do it. So in order to get somebody to keep the law, you're even allowed to go ahead and play around with the author of who it is that said it. Okay. Now the Gemara goes further. But everybody said if you bake the bread over coals from illegal fuel source, but now the wood, let's use in this case, the wood of the arla, right? If it's cooked over of illegal fuel source, it's good. That the bread is good. There's an argument. This is only the case of smothered coals, the coals that are only gray. There's no more fire. So now the original fuel source has essentially been burnt off, and we're only dealing with the overall heat of the thing. But flickering coals, where there's still a little bit of fire, is no good. 27A4. Afilu gecholim loy chashes nami mutarin. Even loaves that were baked over flickering coals are permitted, even though according to Rebbe. And the Bryce is referring to such as well. Flickering coals where there's little bits of fire are awesome because the fire is directly imparting benefit to the bread. Now I understand. That would make sense. That even with this flickering fire, it's still mutter according to Rebbe. Pasti osa to yesheva eitzim bepasta Rebbe echem mishkachaslo. Then how are you ever going to find a case according to Rebbe that the bread should be forbidden because benefit is being imparted to him if we're by coals where the fire is still going, albeit much less, but it's still going, that the what he called that is already mutter. So what's his case of bread that is benefiting from the illegal source? Rebbe is saying that the bread is asur because there is benefit improvement in the past, is when the fire may not be right underneath it, but the fire is directly opposite it. The flickering flames are coming from the side. We are now on 27b1. We turn the page. Michlals of the Gemara, the Rabbanon, the Pligi Olel, that the Rabbanon who argue on it hold sharu afilu shavuka kenegdoi, that the Rabbanon must hold that the bread is good even when the fire is opposite the bread. Then how do you ever find a case of that wood, the wood of Arlo, for an example, of Kalayim, is also for benefit according to the Rabbanon? If they say that the fire is even next to it, it's still good. What's the problem? How do they ever have an Osadic case? You're right, not cooking. If they make a bench, Jeffrey Karp gets tired of his new fruit tree. He said it's making a big mess, and he gets a heter and he cuts part of the tree, the trunk of the tree, and he makes a bench out of it. So he puts it by his front door so people could sit. That's illegal because that benefit, you're sitting directly on the wood. Says the Gemara by Minei Rami Bar Chama Meir of Chizda. Tanish Siku Ba'atzte Hegdish. If one fired up an oven with holy wood that you consecrated for the Beis Hamikdash, va'ofa by pas, and he baked bread with it, in it, l'Rabbanan d'sharu b'kamai samahu, and according to the Rabbanan who permit the bread with the fuel of Arla and Kalayim all the way back when we began the daf today. What's the halacha? So amalei hapasi surah. No, in this case the bread is awesome. I just want to remind everybody: there's two kinds of holiness. There's kedushas haguf and kedushas damim. There's monetary sanctity, which if you use it inappropriate, the kedusha falls away. And then there's something called kedushas haguf, physical sanctity, that no matter what you do, even if you use it inappropriately, the holiness, the sanctity does not fall off. Also, kedushas haguf can never be redeemed onto something else. Kedushas damim, monetary sanctity, could obviously be redeemed onto money, and it itself would then become non-sacred. Good, keeping that in mind. Uma ben zula arla. So, Gemara, what is the difference between this case of kodesh wood, where Rav Chizda says the bread is aser, is forbidden even according to the Rabbanon, and the case of Arla and Kalayim, which the Rabbanim said is allowed? Amarava hachi hashtav. What's the comparison? Arla b'tela b'mosayim. Arla can be nullified 1 in 100. To remind everybody, chulin is nullified in 60 to 1. Truma is nullified 100 to 1. Arla and Kalayim are nullified 200 to 1. Okay? That's when the Isser is nullified against good stuff by these ratios. Arla b'tela b'masayim. Arla can be nullified in 200 parts of regular chulin. Hegdish afilu be'elef loy batul. Holiness, concentrated items are never batul, because its holiness makes it chashuv. Its holiness makes it chashuv. So that's the difference. If you have a question, this would be the question. The moment you fire up the oven with this wood that was kodesh, that was holy, what did you just do by firing it up on your oven? You just were moil. You did me'ilah. You used it inappropriately. And what do we say? That's something that has kedusha, has domim, monetary sanctity. The moment you use it inappropriately, what happens to it? Its kedusha, its holiness falls off. The chol heched demoral, and anything that was used inappropriately, hamasik nopul, it automatically falls out of holiness and falls to unsacred chulin, which means now the bread is being cooked with fuel that's not actually holy, that's now actually perfectly good chulin. Why can't I use the bread? Now that's a great question. Yes, you fired it up with holy wood, but the moment you fired it up, you were moil behegdish. You use the hegdish inappropriately. By using it inappropriately, by definition, you allowed it to fall into chulin. Not a problem. Amar Papa, so why is the bread also? Amar Papa, hochi ba'atze shalom emaskinon. We're talking about wood that was consecrated, was made holy for the use of purchasing shalomim. Shalomim, those are kedusha aguf. Those have physical sanctity, whose kedusha never falls off. Va'aliba de Rabbi Yehuda de Omar. And now we're on 27b. We're getting to the end of where we're stopping today. We're stopping by the two dots. Hedish b'shoigeg mischalel. In a case, he said, by the case of Shlomim, he said like this. That means because the Shlomim, before you throw its blood on the Mizbeach, it still has the din of Kedushas Domim. It still has the din of monetary sanctity until you throw its blood on the altar. Hedish b'shoigeg mischalel. What he called hedish, unknowingly, it will fall off. It will lose its kedusha. But if you do it deliberately to try to lose its sanctity, it doesn't work because the Torah talks about me'ilah, using it inappropriately, bishkaga, unknowingly. But if you use it b'mezid on purpose, you're not getting away with it. It remains holy. B'chiva the la bar me'uleh b'mezid my tamalov. Charlie, are you telling me you can't hear me, or it's still good? You can hear me. No? You can hear me. Okay, good. B'mezid my tamaloi. B'mezid, why not? Chiva the la bar me'ulehu. Because b'mezid, it's not me'ilah because it only says bishkaga, only inadvertently. Loy nafik l'chulin, that it doesn't fall to chulin. It doesn't fall to unconscious. No matter how many times you do it on purpose, it does. The holiness doesn't fall off, and it doesn't become unconsecrated. Shalomim nami, shalomim as well. Chiva delav bar me'ilahu. Since shalomim in reality is kedusha sagov, it has physical sanctity. It never loy nafik l'chulin. It never falls off the chulin. So therefore, that's what we're talking about over here. The wood that you're using has kedusha saguf, has physical holiness to it. So even if you use it illegally, right, which normally would make it fall to chulin, and then the bread that's cooked in it would be cooked in a pot that's being fired up with chulin, would be good. Here it's being fired up with wood that's really a shalomim. A shalomim is kedusha saguf, physical sanctity, and physical sanctity, if you do it on purpose, never falls off. So, Frank, the Gemara, but is that true what you said, that any fire that gets fired up automatically, you've done me'ilah, and in the normal scheme of things, its holiness falls off and becomes chulin? For Tanya, we learned, all things that must be burnt, if their ashes are permitted, you're allowed to use it, except the ashes of an Asherah tree, that can't be used. Obviously, something from Avodah Zarah cannot be used. And the ash of something that was made consecrated cannot be all used ever. That means, even if you moil with it, it doesn't matter. Its kedusha stays forever. According to this, if you use wood that's holy and you burnt it, it doesn't matter. The holiness stays. No, this Baraisa that says the Kedusha always stays is if it was stam combustion. What happens is that it came by itself. The fire broke out by itself in consecrated wood. The leka inish the nibble, there was no person that was over on Me'ilah. No person committed Me'ilah. No person used it inappropriate. So in such a case, just because it got fired up and became ash, the ash still retains its holiness. We're talking about the one that we say, the offer, the ash never loses its holiness, is the ash that needs to be put away. Which ash is that? We learned it yesterday. The Truma Sadeshan, the ash of all the sacrificial parts that were burned overnight. In the morning, that ash has to be put the samoi next to the mizbeach. The tadetanya, the samoi eitz ala mizbeach, and you should place it next to the mizbeach. What does that mean? 27:3, benachas, gently so it shouldn't scatter. The samoi, place it kuloi, all the ash. The samoi shaloi yifazeh, and you should place it in such a way that it does over the place. So the Torah's requirement that the truma of the ash be placed permanently next to the altar that's only by the truma sadeshen, not by a regular case of fire that you would put under a pot, which then would be moil behegdish, and therefore the bread should be good that's cooked on it, because then it's only with chulin. Very good, everybody. This is where we're stopping.